Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Erica Timmerman, our fearless leader, president of Serenoa chapter FNPS.
And good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining our Zoom meeting. And we think this is going to be a great one for, especially for those people who are just starting out with native plants in their yards. So Tom's a great speaker. Looking forward to hearing what he has to say. As Fran mentioned, anybody who was on a little earlier, we have a board meeting, and we've been doing that by Zoom once a month in general. And this is the end in December. That is the end of the term of office of all the board members, except we don't get anybody taking our place. So some of us were going to have to continue, but we really encourage people to join our board, offer ideas, any input we can get, any new ideas. We are always open to that, and you're always welcome. So Fran has a few things that she would like to talk about. So I will turn this over to Fran at this time.
All right, before you do, I want to quick say that if you're new to Zoom, you've got a bar now on your screen with pictures lined up. That bar can be moved by you with your cursor, to the top, the bottom, the side, either side. So I would suggest moving it to the top, and that way you'll see most of the slide. So take it away, Fran.
Okay, well, it's great to have all of you here. I know you're going to enjoy Tom's talk and learn a lot, but before I get to introducing him, I want to mention some of our activities coming up. This Saturday, we've got a field trip to Sweetbay Nursery in Parish. That's Tom's nursery. And there you can look at demonstration gardens, enjoy the beautiful venue. They're very beautiful live oaks with Spanish moss. It's just like visiting a park. And we'll be sending information on that field trip, which will be starting at 9 a.m. And of course, we'll be taking all precautions, social distancing, asking people to wear a mask, those kinds of things. Then I want to mention another field trip. This one is going to be in December, on the 12th of December, 9 o'clock at Myakka River State Park. And I know a lot of people know the park, but if you haven't been there, really plan to make this trip. We will meet just inside the gate. You take a left turn into the place where the Museum and Information Center is. So that's where we'll be meeting. We'll be sending more information out on that too. And then one more field trip, Damon Moore, who is known to many of you, he works in Manatee County, is going to be leading a field trip to Robinson Preserve Extension on January 23rd. So we've got some really exciting things coming up, so do stay tuned. Okay. I know a lot of you know Tom Heitzman. He's one of Florida's foremost plantsmen. He's been supplying our area with native plants for many years. He started Sweetbay Nursery in Parish in 1995. He's a graduate of Ohio State University in horticulture, and he's been the past president of this chapter, and just a member and very important board member, helping us over the years. So He's also been past president of the Florida Association of Native Nurseries and Manatee County Audubon. Yeah, so Tom, take it away.
Okay. Well, let's get started. Thank you all for having me. As Fran said, I think I know a lot of you out there. It's great to see so many familiar names and faces come up on the screen here. So hopefully preaching to the choir a little bit, but hopefully you can pick up some new information as we move through it. So what the nursery has really evolved is designing, supplying plants for homeowners who want to attract more wildlife. So the talk is basically on that, and it's going to highlight a lot of plants at the end, but people are really into attracting more wildlife, butterflies, pollinators, and such. So there's the presenter. We've kind of talked over this, owner, degree in horticulture from Ohio State, and my other positions, and above all, the native plant enthusiast I like. So let's get right into it. The benefits of using the native plants, which most of you know, is attracting lots of wildlife, as well as just the beauty that you can get with native plants. Let me start my timer here too, so that I can try to keep it at a minimum here. Native plants grow a lot. Like I said, a lot of you already know this, but native plants, minimal use of water once established. You don't need to water. You don't need to like put water on your lawn every day or every other day and use up all our most precious resource, water. By doing the right proper installation, either with mulch, shell, hardscapes like a walk, a lot or no water. They'll survive with minimal use of fertilizers and pesticides. You see these green fancy lawns out there in many subdivisions, and all those are sprayed with fertilizer and pesticides regularly. Tons, millions, when you think of golf courses and lawns all throughout the country. So a lot of pesticides and fertilizers. It's going to wash right back down into our waterways. And look at the beauty you can get with firebush and beautyberry. And they require less maintenance somewhat. Mowing, you really need to mow once a week. You need to edge once a week. You know, mow, go, and blow, we call those guys. Native plants, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, 2 times a year hard pruning. But other than that, you can pretty much enjoy the flowers and the fall seed heads from flowers and grasses. They can give as much beauty as the flowers themselves. Native plants create a sense of place. You know, when you have all those tropicals in there, the Thai plants from Asia, all these different plants from all over the world, it just doesn't necessarily feel like Florida. You know, when I look at beautyberry, muhlygrass, gumbo limbo, certain types of palm trees, it just makes me feel more like Florida. It just gives you a sense of place. And of course, the benefit of attracting wildlife and pollinators. These plants have evolved through the millennia, and you know, these birds and insects have come to rely on the native plants that were found here before the Europeans arrived. So we'll get into now a little bit of the birds and the use of the plants as far as in the landscape. You know, so many people want to try to incorporate the plants into the landscape, and it is important in using them in the right spots. Just a little bit. They're going to provide the berries. They're going to provide food. All these plants: velvet leaf coffee, firebush, Virginia creeper, one of my favorites, beautyberry, all are favorites of many of our birds. And of course, nectar, primarily for hummingbirds, but there again, a lot of other insects will use it also. Coral bean, coral honeysuckle, firebush. I'll go over these later. And seeds and grains, I think, is overlooked a lot of times. You get a lot of goldfinches that'll use the seeds. A lot of the pine and palm warblers will use the seeds. Thrushes will use those acorns. Blue jays will pick up acorns. All the little seed pods on the things. So many times we're too fastidious to trim off all the dead foliage as soon as the flowers are done. But if you leave the seeds, they can be decorative as well as providing a beneficial food source to many, many different birds. And of course, insects, very important. With all the pesticides that are sprayed, we kill a lot of insects, and I hear over and over again that the bird species are declining. You know, the bird populations are way down, and it's because we're spraying everything and killing all their food source with pesticides. So very important to leave areas where you don't spray. And whenever I see a light, porch light at night, and I see all the innumerable little moths flying around there, all those moths are laying little caterpillars that all the little songbirds, migratory birds, are searching out in the oak trees all around us. So very important to leave the bugs. And of course, water, a little bird bath, a little pond, very easy to put in. You can just do even a terracotta pot, makes a nice little bird bath and a water source. Drippers can be very nice too, which is in the top right corner there with the goldfinches on it. Make a really nice attracting for birds with that little bit of dripping water. Shelter, thickets, shrubbery, or even brush piles. Okay, so diversity is very important. Mixing it up with trees and shrubs. You just don't want to have monocultures in there. In the middle photo, you see the cabbage palm. You see the sea grape. There's palmetto in there, silver buttonwood, blanket flower, all in a small space there. So you always have some interest in the landscaping, and you just get some more diversity in there. I mentioned brush piles. Very easy to do. After the storm we just had last week, you know, we had lots of branches down everywhere that makes great brush piles. And a lot of people don't like them because they say they look unsightly, but if you put it in the out-of-way area of your yard or put a small fence around it, you can create a nice little brush pile, and lots of things use it. A lot of birds, turtles, you see snakes out there, the good snakes, yellow racers, the yellow rat snake, black racers. Brush piles are simple to do. They don't have to be that big, and they will attract a lot of birds and other small creatures. Snags and cavities. Dead wood is really important. Most people cut out their dead wood or cut down a dead tree, but if you can leave somewhat of a stump or a snag, you get all kinds of beetles and bugs that'll go up there that are going to in turn attract a lot of different birds. So dead wood is very important. Leave some of it. And if you don't have that, of course, nest boxes. Bluebird boxes are the best, but tufted titmice will use nest boxes. Carolina wrens will use them. Your red-bellied woodpeckers will use them. So the screech owls will use them. So lots of birds will use nest boxes. But Pam, who helps here at the nursery, mentioned that I think more than 60 or 70% of birds actually nest more on the ground than in trees. So it's really important to, we've seen a lot of it, leave the leaves. You know, they like leaf litter in areas where they can nest besides just trees and shrubs. So we'll talk about a few plants. Many of you might be familiar with these, but some of the newer members might not be so much. So these are some of the more tried and true shrubs that do well in our area and are beneficial to birds and other wildlife. So your Walters viburnum, nice medium-sized shrub up to 12 or 15 feet, dry to wet conditions, evergreen to semi-evergreen, white flowers primarily in the spring. The green berries you see in the center actually turn to red, and then they turn to a blue-black. Very pretty. and a favorite of a lot of birds. There are a lot of cultivars of this plant that have been developed over the last few years. So you've got your some of the dwarf varieties, medium-sized varieties, and of course the regular Walters by Burr. Marlberry, another one of my favorite plants. Fragrant white flowers, a couple times a year. Beautiful fruit, a favorite of many birds. Takes full shade to full sun, doesn't get too big. Very few pests, if any, pest problems on it. Just a great shrub, all-around shrub. Beautyberry, of course, I think you're all familiar with this. Beautiful purple berries. They are edible. If you add enough sugar to them, you can eat them. They're not too bad. The leaves were actually used as a mosquito repellent at one time. So that's a plus. Another name is French mulberry. For some reason they call it that. Very widely distributed shrub, will take full sun or shade also. Beautiful fruits though. And of course, wild coffee, another great shrub. You've got a couple different flavors of coffee. You've got the wild coffee, which has a shiny leaf. You have in the center the short leaf coffee, was known as satin leaf or dull leaf coffee, but now they call it the short leaf coffee. Has more of a sheen to the leaf. There's a Bahama coffee. There's a dwarf wild coffee. So a couple choices to choose from there. And of course, firebush. Every garden should have a firebush, just for the amount of flowers, the amount of butterflies, the amount of birds. It will attract, you'll attract birds to the fruit, you'll attract birds to the flowers, like your hummingbirds. We see hummingbirds almost every day at our firebush. Yesterday, this morning, they love the firebush. Simpson stopper, another good one, multi-use plant, can be grown as a small tree. It's used as hedges a lot, as a formal hedge because it'll take shearing very well. So it could be used as a foundation planting. It could be used as a tall screening on the edge of a property, or it can be used as a specimen tree, and it's depending on your situation. Evergreen foliage, bright red berries, edible, fragrant white flowers. Bees love it. Really good shrub. Elderberry, it's great for the flowers and the fruit. Attracts a lot of birds to the fruit. Somewhat of a short-lived plant though. It flowers out, produces the beautiful flowers, gets fairly tall, 12 feet tall. Likes it more on the wet side, but probably only a 5 to 7 year lifespan. Coral bean, another good one for hummingbirds. Bright red flowers in the spring that last a good month maybe. One drawback is it is thorny and the seeds are poisonous. So clip the seeds off. They're beautiful red color, but they are poisonous. And that would be, the coral bean would be used as more of a specimen plant. Wax myrtle, another good one for birds. You can see the berries on there. Multi-stem, small tree or shrub. I do see people that keep it as more of a hedge, but it really lends itself better to a small tree or a large shrub. In many of our situations, in the homeowners these days have small lots, so some of our shrubs like wax myrtle make a nice small tree rather than a shrub, where a large tree like some type of oak that might get too big and overpower a small yard. Hollies, the Dahoon and Yopon holly. Dahoons are more of a tree. The Yopons can be a tree or is typically more of a shrub. There is a variety of the Yopon, the dwarf Yopon, Schilling's Delight, not to be confused with Miss Schiller's Delight. The Schilling's holly is a dwarf male variety that stays very compact. And then you have your regular upright Yopon. Word on hollies, males and females. If you want the red berries, you need to have a female plant. And it helps to have a male somewhat close by to pollinate the berries, so you get more fruit on your hollies if you have the female, and then know that there is a male close by. In our native cabbage palm, our state tree of Florida, lots of birds love this plant. They love the fruit. A lot of insects love the flowers, the fragrant flowers when they're blooming. It's a great tree, great, lends itself to it, gives Florida, our area, a sense of place for sure. You can see the pileated woodpecker on the berries. They really love the berries of this tree. And of course, live oak. I think live oak's probably one of the, I think Doug Tallamy said it, that there's more birds and insects that use the live oak than any other tree. You get all these little moths and bugs up there in the tree that are laying little caterpillars, and all the birds that are up there finding those little caterpillars to eat that we get to enjoy. You see the flowers there in the middle, the acorns on the right. It's a bumper year for live oak acorns right now. There's lots of acorns dropping on the ground. Florida privet, nice shrub. There again, this is a dioecious shrub, so you need a male and a female. Females get the fruit. These fruit very early and are very beneficial to a lot of our migratory birds as they move from South America and Central America up into the United States for their summer homes. So they come across the Gulf, they find the early fruiting Florida privets, stock up on their carbohydrate and sugar reserves, and move on throughout the country, our country. Sparkleberry, found in Manatee in Sarasota County. More of a small tree, is a specimen tree. One of our blueberries. The fruits are very tasty, a little dry, but very tasty. Very showy flowers, very beautiful bark on it. Gets up to about 15 to 20 feet, so it's a nice specimen small tree. And your winged sumac, I like it for the fruit and for the fruit color. Flowers are beautiful. The fruit you can make a tea out of. Birds like the fruit, obviously. Showy red fall color in the fall. It does tend to sucker a little bit, so you need to keep it trimmed that way so it doesn't take over an area. But you will get some beautiful red fall color in those leaves. And of course, our namesake, the Sweetbay Magnolia, which if we go hiking around a little bit, we might see some on the property Saturday. But beautiful tree. Birds really like the red fruits, and they'll spread them far and wide. Beautiful evergreen tree, fragrant white flowers. More on the wet side. It can get very large over time, so you do need to give this tree some room. Our necklace pod, multi-stem shrub up to about 10 feet. Silvery leaves, beautiful yellow flowers, and these little seed pods that look like a necklace. More good coastal plant, more very salt tolerant. Vines, a lot of people don't like, but there are a place for vines, and vines are very important to birds. I see all the different birds eating the Virginia creeper berries, and the corky stem passion vine, and coral honeysuckle berries. Okay, so talk a little bit about butterflies here. Variety is in anything, in any kind of garden, variety is very important. You know, you need to have wildflowers. You need to have different plants that are going to flower at different times. You cluster them together, you know, to provide shelter and camouflage, and just to get those different textures mixed in there. You plant a variety so that you have plants flying at different times of the year, so you always have something of interest in there to look at. It's important to have a water source for butterflies and for birds, and then to cater to their life cycles. As far as having the flowerings or the host plants that they need there at the right time. And of course, eliminating the use of pesticides. So the basics, which a lot of you might know, but invite them to the yard by catering to their needs and their life cycle. So the butterflies are going to need a host plant to feed on. So they will come to flowers, but if you have the host plants, that's what's really going to bring a butterfly into your garden or your yard. And of course, the 4 life cycles. Adult butterflies feed on the flowers, any kind of different flowers, and there again, diversity is key. And then of course the caterpillars rely on the host plants, but it's just amazing growing all these different host plants in the nursery and seeing all the butterflies that are drawn in by having these plants just in the nursery. It's just a no-brainer. If people plant those plants in their yard, they're definitely going to bring those butterflies in. I've seen butterflies fly through the nursery, catch a downwind of a pawpaw. They catch the scent of that pawpaw in the air, and they'll just start flying around and zero right in on that plant. It's just amazing to watch them. So here are some specific plants for attracting pollinators, and that's in bloom. There is the dotted horsemint, which is a great nectar plant. So your host plants, and that's a sulfur butterfly. I'm not sure which one. There's quite a few sulfur caterpillars. The most popular, of course, is milkweed. Most people get started on their butterfly kick by wanting to plant for the monarchs. Of course, our iconic butterfly, and also the queen and the soldier. And most popular is the pink swamp milkweed, and then the aquatic milkweed, or the white flowering swamp milkweed. The aquatic milkweed is the only evergreen perennial milkweed in Florida. All the other milkweeds will die back to the ground, typically in the wintertime. But the aquatic milkweed, the Asclepias perennis, will actually be evergreen throughout the year. The white twine vine is also a host plant for your monarch, queen, and soldier. Your passion vines, beautiful for your Gulf literary and zebra longwing. Typically, if these vines are in the shade, they're going to attract your zebra longwing. If they're in the sun, they're going to attract your Gulf literary. So those are your passion vines. Back to vines, they're again using this in the landscape situation. Fences work well. An arbor works well for a vine. Some of the passion vines actually can even be grown just right on the ground as like a ground cover. Even coral honeysuckle can be used as a type of a ground cover if you're using it in your landscape. An old dead tree stump, you can grow a vine over the top of that and almost look shrub-like in a way. So don't be afraid of vines. They're very beneficial to birds and butterflies. So your sennas, the privet and the Bahama sennas are the 2 most common that we use around here. Both nice shrubs, flower in the winter, adaptable to a variety of conditions, somewhat dry, somewhat shady, to full sun. So a nice flowering shrub, and a necessity if you're going to try to attract any of the sulfur butterflies, which we have a lot of around here. The cloudless sulfur, orange barred sulfur, sleepy orange. There's quite a few of them, from tiny 1 inch across up to 3 inches across. Hercules club and wild lime, the giant swallowtail. Giant swallowtails will also lay their eggs on citrus trees, which both these trees are in the citrus family. But the citrus trees typically in Florida are sprayed for citrus greening and other pests that they commonly get. And typically when they're sprayed, they're getting the pesticides, you're going to kill the giant swallowtail caterpillar down there in the right corner. So no spray on your wild lime or Hercules club. The spicebush and sassafras plant for the spicebush swallowtail. We're pretty much at the southern limits, so anybody that's in the North of here, or if anybody's in the northern part of the state, these plants do a lot better, but they will, if you get them in the right spot, enough shade, right conditions, they will grow around this area here also. And this is the sassafras and spice bush. And there again, the Sweetbay Magnolia, host for the eastern tiger swallowtail, Palamedes swallowtail, and the spice bush swallowtail. So cool tree, fragrant flowers, and it's a host for 3 different butterflies. The red bay, host for the Palamedes and the spice bush swallowtail. The red bays are taking a hit. There's a disease that's killing them that's carried by an insect that it puts a fungal disease into the red bay, and it's basically been killing them. But we still see a lot of red bays growing up, and a lot of the young ones seem to survive for a number of years. They will produce fruit and reseed and come up. It seems the older trees are the ones that are dying. So I think we almost were going to stop growing the red bay for a while, but we still find a lot of butterflies that get onto the small plants that we have in the nursery. So they will live for 3 to 10, maybe 15 years. So we still feel it's a plant that you should be growing and distributing to keep the butterflies around. Wax Myrtle again, and the Sumac I mentioned earlier. But these are hosts for the red banded hair streak, a beautiful little butterfly. And it's amazing when you start really looking at it, almost every plant is a host for something out there. Some of the small, little, obscure butterflies and moths, they need all these native plants that they developed with. And even the live oak. You think of the live oak as being a shade tree and good for birds, but it's also a host for the dusty wing and the hair streaks. Water dropwort going the other way. This is just a small wetlands plant. Only gets up to about 3 or 4 feet, but it's a good host plant for your black swallowtail, as well as dill and fennel, which are not native, but black swallowtails, beautiful little white caterpillars, beautiful butterfly. That's your water dropwort, good for a wet garden or a little rain garden. Your capers, Jamaican caper and limber caper, they're host plants for your sulfur, the great southern white butterfly, which is a fairly common butterfly around here. But the capers, again, you get the benefits of the flowers, a cool looking seed pod, evergreen shrub, cool flowers. The limber caper tends to flower at night, but you will get lots of the great southern white butterflies coming around to lay eggs on these plants. Frog fruit, good ground cover, which is needed to replace sod in some areas, but the frog fruit, I've seen it growing on the beach and in dry sand, and I've seen it growing in wet areas. So very adaptable ground cover. Probably the white peacock's one of our more common butterflies around here. And we have a lot of frog fruit growing just in the roads and on the ground around the nursery, and we get lots of white peacocks. So a very simple ground cover you can plant in almost any garden, any yard, and you'll definitely get the white peacocks coming around. Hammock twin flower, it's another good ground cover. Sun to full shade. Sun to full shade. There again, the white peacocks, host plant, and the common buckeye, which are fairly common around here at different times of the year. Great little evergreen ground cover, cold hardy, very adaptable. And of course, your pawpaws. Pawpaws are somewhat difficult to grow and get established, but you will get the zebra swallowtails coming around if you can get your pawpaws established. If you're lucky enough, like us, we have lots of the Semina reticulata, the flag pawpaw, common pawpaw, growing in the woods. So we're fortunate to get lots of zebra swallowtails. So those were the host plants. Now these are just some of the nectar plants. And like you said, if you're trying to incorporate things into your garden, it's, you know, mix it up, keep a variety, step things up. As you can see on this building, the foundation planting a little bit taller, and then you step down to your ground covers or perennials in front of that. So dotted horseman's a good flowering, short-lived perennial, but you get lots of wasps, lots of butterflies, lots of different cool pollinators that are attracted to those flowers. The Monarda. The Squarestem and the dwarf Squarestem are two ever-flowering small perennial flowers, shrubs. Ground cover. The dwarf is more of a ground cover. The regular snow Squarestem gets a little bit taller, up to about 3 feet maybe, but flowers most of the year, and lots of nectaring going on in these flowers. So nice little plant for the garden, very drought tolerant. And of course, firebush. These red flowers you get all kinds of butterflies coming to these flowers. If you have a big plant, you can see up to easily 10 butterflies at one time on one plant. So it's just a magnet for butterflies. Go back to that. Firebush can be used somewhat as a hedge. It can be a small tree even. It can be cut down very hard and let come back, and it almost kept as a hedge. So it has in the landscape multiple uses. You can put it more to the property line there again, use it as a shrub or screening, or up and closer where it could be used as a specimen by itself. Tropical sage, or the Salvia coccinea, great nectar plant for hummingbirds and for a lot of the different butterflies. Short-lived or biannual, you might get 2 or 3 years out of it, but lots of flowers, full sun to partial shade on this one. Your wild coffee, saw this photo before, but the shiny coffee on the left, the short-leaf coffee in the center. There's the Bahama coffee. The regular wild coffee can get up to 7 feet, so it's a great plant to be used. Can be take full shade for screening as a border. The dwarf coffee makes a nice mass ground cover, shade, or actually even full sun. So very adaptable, evergreen, white flowers in the spring, and the beautiful red berries this time of the year. The lantanas, 2 of our native lantanas, the button sage and Pineland lantana. The button sage, Lantana involucrata, nice pink to white flowers, small flowers, but flowers throughout the year. Great for nectaring. And then the Pineland lantana, which is yellow, gets up to about 2 to 3 feet. Flowers off and on throughout the year, and then produces little purple berries too, which the birds like. So butterflies and birds for both this plant. Porterweed, nice ground cover, more full sun to partial shade, very drought tolerant, salt tolerant. So if you're out on the coast, it's a great one to use out there. Flowers mostly in the morning, and the flowers tend to close up a little bit later in the day, but a great nectaring plant. Tick seeds, or coreopsis. The 2 primary ones are the tick seed on the left. We call that just the regular coreopsis with the black center, and then you have your lance leaf coreopsis on the right with the yellow center, which tends to be a little more perennial. Very showy, small flowers, but very showy. A little more on the moist side on both of these. They'll do a little bit better, but profuse flowers, lots of nectar in those little flowers. More of a shrub, but likes it a little more wet, is the Buttonbush. Very kind of cool flowers, very showy. Lots of nectaring going on there. Lots of bees and butterflies use those, but it does like it a little more on the wet side. So when you're doing landscaping or whatever, you get to know your property. If you have a wet area, something like a buttonbush or the frog fruit or the twin flowers as a ground cover, something that likes it wet. Don't put something that likes it dry. It'll probably never survive there. It's important to kind of know your site, know your situation, and then plant the plant that would adapt best to that area. As I said, blanket flower likes it very dry. If you put it in too wet of an area, it's never going to do well. But if you put it in an area where it's dry, it'll thrive. And typically reseed. It's considered an annual. Once it flowers out, it kind of dies out, but you basically pull the dead plant out and you've got new little seedlings coming up to replace it. Goldenrod, they're just finishing blooming, but throughout the different goldenrods, we have the Chapman's goldenrod, which actually can start blooming as early as June or July. And really then it'll bloom into the fall. And then as the other goldenrods, the wand goldenrod and the pine barren goldenrod, and then finally the seaside goldenrod all follow suit. So you can get a long blooming period with the goldenrod. And these are just a magnet to bees and many other different small pollinators. So very nice plant to have. And just some of the different wildflowers that are beneficial for the nectaring. Silkgrass, a nice fall bloomer. Your giant ironweed, it's more of a late summer bloomer, beautiful purple flowers. Coneflower, scorpion tail is a really good one, short-lived, perennial. The blazing star, fall bloomer, but beautiful showy purple flowers. Green eyes above it there, good spring bloomer. Fragrant flowers. And your black-eyed Susans, they like it dry, but they'll bloom off and on all through the year. And then, of course, your sunshine mimosa, which is a good lawn alternative. And the cool flowers are really good for nectaring. And on the mention of the sunshine mimosa, there's a few people in the native plant industry now that are working on lawn substitutes, and they're trying a number of different evergreen plants, one of them being the like the twin flower, and they're trying to get it to where they can grow it and actually cut it like sod and be able to sell these ground covers where you would buy them like a piece of sod rather than having to buy grass. So hopefully within the next 5 years or so, there'll be a product that'll be commercially available for people to be able to start using that in their yard rather than sod all the time. A few more wildflowers, the calumet, very cool little white flowers, fragrant foliage. Button snake root, good for a wet area. Beautiful little cool flowers. It's one of the eryngiums. Another vine is the cluster vine. Beautiful blue flowers a couple times a year. Starry rosin, a nice perennial, big yellow flowers for a long period. Sea lavender, white flowers, a good coastal plant. It's a good one for nectaring. We get the queen butterflies just seem to love that flower for some reason. We have lots of queens on that. Stokes aster, spiderwort, good morning bloomer, needs to be in the shade. But the flowers on spiderwort are actually edible also. And then of course your blue-eyed grass, another spring bloomer, but another good one for a lawn replacement because it will fill in, get very dense. It could be cut down a couple times a year, but nice blue flowers in the springtime. So I think most of you, being in the native plant side, you know how best to use native plants, but just a refresher, all landscapes need care. I think you need to know your site, right plant, right place. Make sure if you've got a wet area, you need to plant something that's going to like it wet. Know your objective. Is it the foundation planting? Is it a butterfly garden? Is it screening? You want to have proper layout and planting. Of course, watering to get it established, and periodic care. And when you're putting in a landscape, I always kind of start with a tree is your most dominant element of any landscape beside the house. So your tree is going to be your kind of focal point, or eventually going to be the biggest thing in the landscape. So you kind of start with your tree, then you kind of start out from the property line. Do you want to do screening? Do you want to block out your neighbor? Do you want to block out a street light? What's your objective there? So kind of start on the property line and then kind of start working in toward your house. As you come in, you might have some mass plantings that could be up to 5 to 7 feet high. As you get closer to the house, you want to keep those at about 2 to 3 feet high. And then as you get even closer to your patio or whatever, you want to have like a low ground cover and maybe just a nice specimen planting somewhere. So trees the big thing, then the property line, then you kind of just work in towards your patio or to your entertainment area, or view out one of your windows, so that you can make it all come together. Where we go back, native plants do require care. I think most people feel that when they plant natives, they don't have to do anything to them, but any landscape needs occasional clipping, weeding, raking. There's an initiative on now, leave the leaves and everything, and I definitely agree with that. In the right areas, is you need to leave the leaves, but if you're dealing with an HOA situation, you have to be very careful so you have a proper balance, so that your native landscape looks attractive to everybody else and is still providing the wildlife benefit that you want to create. So little things like putting in a small fence in your wildflower garden, like or a bench even, so it makes it look like it's part of the landscape rather than it's an area that you just are not maintaining at all. I think that's the problem when people try to do these landscapes, or a native landscape or wildflower garden. I think they use wild a little too liberally, because what happens is they just let it go, they don't maintain it at all, and then it becomes somewhat unsightly, and then the neighbor complains or the HOA complains. So if you keep it trimmed to a point, keep it cleaned up, rake the edge of it, leave the leaves inside the bed, but on the edge of the bed have a nice little border along a sidewalk, or if you have a little bit of a turf area, it's like a path or a walkway, just keep it neat there so that it creates an appearance of it being maintained. If there's large dead limbs or something, you might have to take some of those out. If you have trees, they need to be thinned or topped periodically, and it just gives a maintained appearance, so that it doesn't disturb your neighbors. So starting to sum it up, some of the websites that we've used, a lot of you know these are the basic ones. Native Feeder Neighborhood's a really good one. Florida Wildflower Foundation is doing a lot of work now and trying to find some different plants to use. They're a great one. NABA, North American Butterfly Association, and of course Audubon Society, very good. You can get on one of theirs links, and they'll tell you what nurseries are in your area all over the country, and what good plants to buy. And of course, some of the great books that are out there. Nature's Best Hope, newest one by Douglas Tallamy, Gardening for Florida's Butterflies. Attracting Native Pollinators, a really good one. Of course, we've heard Craig Hugel speak a number of times. He's a good one. Natural Florida Landscapes by our own Laurel Schiller and Dan Walton. Good one about maintaining your landscape. Lots of good reading. Ginny's Stillbolt out there. She's got some great books. Lots of good information out there. So I guess we'll see many of you on Saturday. And since many of you have been to the nursery before and know the pretty much layout of the nursery, I thought it might be nice to go into the woods a little bit and take a tour of the property from the other side, which many people don't see on the field trip. So we can walk through the woods and see what we're trying to do with we're doing some burning and trying to restore the woods on a small scale. But there's a lot of cool plants back in the woods too that we can look at in their natural environment. And then of course, look around the demonstration beds at the nursery and have time to look around, shop, and visit with everybody. And our policy at the nursery now, Fran mentioned we're in masks, which is important. As long as people are out in the nursery, we don't require them to wear masks out there. But in our checkout area, when they come into the office up there, we do ask people to wear masks when they're closer in there checking out. And we've had no resistance to it at all. Everybody's very cooperative, and it seems to work out very well. So I think that's about it. I'll take some questions now if anybody.
Yep, there were a couple of questions. Let's see. Maybe you stop sharing screen and we can go to a bigger picture. There we go. So where did I put my questions? There we go. First one came in from Claudia. What experience have you had with lawn alternatives such as sunshine mimosa, and are there any others?
Sunshine mimosa does well. One thing, it tends to go somewhat dormant in the wintertime. It will come back easily though. It does fill in. The other alternative they're using a lot now is the lakeside twin flower, Dichorus, I think is the genus, but it tends to do very well. And like I mentioned, there's a couple of nurserymen working on some other alternatives. Evening primrose was one of them. Trying to think of the other plants that he mentioned. But the lakeside.
What about frog fruit? Is frog
fruit's a good one. So they all do well, and as an alternative to grass, the one thing if you have a grass lawn and it's mowed, it's probably, you call it grass, but it's probably a combination of 5 to 10 or 15 more different plants that are in your lawn. You have lots of different weeds in there, and as long as it's mowed, it's kept trim, so it gives it that maintained appearance no matter what's growing in there. So when you try to do a ground cover, a monoculture, you typically are still going to get weeds coming into there. Mimosa, you're still going to get weeds popping up. The frog fruit, you'll get weeds. The twin flower, you're still going to get a few weeds in there. So periodically, you could mow these over, or even take a weed eater, battery wrapper weed eater, and kind of knock it down so it's perceived as it's trimmed. So that's one reason people like lawns. They can get on their mower and just zip through and they're done. So if you have a ground cover like the twin flower, you just need to kind of keep it trimmed and make it look a little more even, and it'll be more acceptable to the neighbors in the HOA.
Good point. All right, Betsy Ilfeld asks, is spicebush salt tolerant?
No, I would say no on that one. If you want to try to use it in your coastal, you just need to put it on the leeward side of your house so it's in a protected area, away from the salt spray. And it will need shade also. The spicebush will.
Okay. Is there any reason, this is Kristen Mazzarella, is there any reason that you know of why my elderberry, 3 years old, didn't bloom much or produce any berries this year?
I'm not sure why it didn't. If it's typically they'll take some shade or full sun. More water possibly.
Kristen, if you're still here, you can turn on your video and your audio and you can answer or ask more specifically. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Oh, there's
I'm here. Yeah, it bloomed really great last year, and I had tons and tons of berries and flowers, and I harvested some, left some for the wildlife. But this year it was like blooming just a little bit, and then it stopped. It just never produced berries, but there were only a couple clusters of flowers, and I'm not sure. It's a pretty well watered area, and it's got parts shade, parts sun. It's on the east side of my house, but there's a 6-foot fence next to it. So, and it's quite tall. It's probably 15 feet or so.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I'm not sure why it's not blooming. If it did the first year, especially, they do. It sounds like you got in the right spot because they'll take partial sun, full sun, partial shade. I've seen them in heavy shade, and it's not going to get really too much taller. I maybe try trimming it back. They're not going to flower now, although I did see some in the wild actually flowering in some areas. It's a funny plant because I'll see it flower at different times of the year. So you might try trimming it back a little bit and you'll get more flowers on the newer growth possibly.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll give that a shot. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So Erica asks, do you cut back silkgrass after it blooms? Is it perennial?
It is perennial, and I do wait as long as I can. There again, I don't like to cut things back right away, but eventually we do trim it down to the ground, just kind of cleans it up, and it will flush out with new grass. It is a perennial, yes.
All right, any other questions? We don't have too many. Are there any, Sean asks from Stocking Savvy, are there any particular plants you think are underutilized in the landscape? Good question.
Probably marlberry. Some of the eupatoriums, I think, are underused. There's some nice little perennials that have showy white flowers throughout the year. Some of the eryngiums, which are like the button snake root. I think there's a Eryngium aromaticum, which is not even in the trade yet, but you see it growing in the wild. It could be a beautiful little ground cover because it's got a unique texture and all. The peperomia is starting to be used a lot more. I think that's been underused some. It makes a nice ground cover in a shady area. The creeping sage is one of the salvias. I think that one's being underused a little bit because there again, it's a great ground cover for a shady area. I think we're guilty as an industry, the native plant industry, of being just like the regular landscape industry. You know, we find plants that do well and they tend to be used over and over again, like your sweet viburnum that you see everywhere, your pygmy date palm that you see every house in Florida probably just about has one. Things like over again. So it's nice to be able to try to get some new ones in, but it's hard to get people's commitment to them. Everybody uses the Walters viburnum, the dwarf, the Miss Schiller's variety. It's used quite a bit. A lot of people are using firebush now, which is great. Everybody uses Kunti, which is great. They're good, tried and true, but there's still a lot of room for some kind of new innovations. And some of the growers are starting to work on some of these to making them more available commercially. So those are a few. The creeping sage I really like, so that's a few of them.
So someone asked, Aaron Schoenberg, are there any eryngiums that do okay with dry soil?
The Eryngium aromaticum does, but we started some, but they're not ready yet. So hopefully we can get those into production. The ecofolium will take it somewhat dry too, the button snake root. So, and it should do well in average soil.
All right, so the best time of year to prune coral bean?
Anytime up until probably the end of January. I've seen them in pastures where they've been mowed down to the ground and they'll flush out, but if you do them too late, you'll eliminate the blooms for that year.
Good
So you
point.
want to make sure probably by the end of January, you want to cut it back very hard. And then as the new shoots come out, it'll form flower buds on that new growth.
All right, I have a question about wax myrtle. I understand wax myrtle is either a male or a female. How do you recognize one from the other?
When they're young, it's next to impossible. And typically when they're nursery grown, they'll sow. If you buy a plant, it's usually multi-stem, and there'll be like 3 to 5 separate seeds that are in that pot. So most likely you end up with a male and a female in that container when you grow it, hopefully. But you really have to wait till they're mature enough to flower, and then you have to distinguish from the male and female flower if it's a female or not. So it's very difficult when they're young plants to know for sure if it's a male or female. Once they're older, the females obviously develop the little waxy berries that the pollen warblers love, and the males just get a little white seed, little yellowish catkin type flower on it that will not produce a fruit.
All right, thanks. So how do you create a strong button sage lantana? Mine is very spindly and falls over easily.
I would try cutting it back very hard. So many people are hesitant of trimming their shrubs down, but this isn't the best time of year. It's still warm out, but as we head into our shorter days and cooler temperatures, things won't recover as fast. But in the springtime, a lot of plants, I'll cut them down very hard. Even firebush, I've cut down to the ground. Even we had a button sage lantana in a container that we cut down to wood is about as big as my thumb. So, about a ½ an inch diameter. So pretty hard. And you just let it sit for 2 or 3 weeks and it'll start flushing out again. But there again, you don't want to cut things back too hard this time of year because it's going to take longer to come back. But most things in Florida, like I said, the firebush, I'll cut it right to the ground. I had a wild lime that got too big where it was. I literally sawed it off of the ground, and it took about a month, but new shoots started coming up, and all of a sudden I've got a 5-foot shrub again. So most things recover pretty quickly if you cut it down really hard, and it usually comes back much fuller.
All right, one other question about pollinators. Do you recommend any specific host plants to help endangered pollinators in Sarasota, Bradenton?
I think they're all endangered.
Pollinators, I guess, is the key.
What was
And he asked about endangered pollinators.
I'm not sure which ones are considered endangered. I think they're, at this point in time, they all are. So it's important to plant anything, a variety. There again, it goes back to mixing it up, the variety. Adding a few ground covers like the twin flower or the frog fruit for your peacock butterflies, and a small shrub of wild lime for your giant swallowtail, and maybe 3 of your sennas for your sulfur butterflies, and mix it up. And then as you get into the gardening, we have some literature at the nursery which lists all the different butterflies, and some of them are more endangered, and then you get the more specific plants for those. So you really got to look at the butterfly you're trying to attract, and then you search out the plant that's a host for, and then you obtain that plant and mix in some nectarine plants, and before you know it, you're going to have those endangered butterflies flying around.
All right. And one last question from Ann Madden. Will these plants be available on Saturday?
98% of them should be. I might have missed 1 or 2, but we're pretty well stocked, so they should be all there on Saturday.
So speaking of Saturday, we have 25 people already registered. So will we be able to maybe split up into groups and do the tour maybe a couple times so there's not so many out at one time?
Yeah, that might be good. We could let half people stay in one area, and then we'll go back in the woods or something. We can split it up like that.
You can do your shopping first and then
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, we can talk. So, and it should be a
Figure that
beautiful day. It's supposed to be, I think, 57 for a low tomorrow night. Yay! And
Oh, yeah.
be a nice change. So it's supposed to be nice through the weekend. So.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to put the link in the chat box. You just go to the Serenoa chapter page on FNPS.org, and if you click on meetings, the registration for Saturday will be there. We ask that you do register because it helps us keep track. So, because there will be other people out there on Saturday. The nursery's not closed. So please do register and join us. So, Fran.
Yes, it just was a wonderful talk, Tom. Thank you so much. Your knowledge is just amazing. I've known Tom for years and years, and it's not a surprise. It's just a delight to hear all this information. So thank you.
Thank you,
And we're looking forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Sounds good. Well, welcome if you can make it. If not, any time.
Right. You're open what, Tuesday through Saturday, right?
Tuesday through Saturday, right? Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
All right.
Will this presentation be available at all?
Yes. We've got them on. We put the links. Where did we put it? I don't know. Yes, it will be available. I think I put it on our YouTube channel. I think we've got a YouTube channel going now. So Serenoa chapter YouTube channel. I'll put it in the next newsletter where you can find them. But it'll take a couple days for me to process. Zoom will process it, and then I've got to trim it and put it up. So.
Okay, and thank you, Karen. You're making all this possible.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad to do it. Well, thank you all for coming.
All right, good meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks again. Wonderful.
Thank you, Karen. It's wonderful having somebody who has some technological knowledge to do this for us. We really appreciate it.
If you had asked me this
that
6
was a
months
great
ago
talk.
that I'd be running Zoom for people, I'd say no way, and here I am.
Yeah. Great. All right.
Okay.
Well, are we going to, this concludes our meeting. So
Right.
Tom, I think does Tom, who's going to be the one that cuts us off?
I
Karen?
can cut us off. You want me to cut it off?
Yeah.
You can
Right.
leave anytime.
Okay.
I'll see you guys on
See y'all.
Saturday.
Yeah.
All
Bye,
right.
everyone.
Bye.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.